Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt trapped in a storm of someone else's chaos, drained by their manipulation, questioning your own worth, and wondering if you'll ever break free? What if I told you that the moment you stop reacting, the moment you trust yourself, the moment you step out of their game entirely, you've already outsmarted them? Today, I'm going to show you how silence, self trust, boundaries, and calm confidence aren't just survival tools. They are your keys to reclaiming power, peace, and freedom, and living a life completely on your terms. Silence as strength is one of the most misunderstood forms of power, especially for people who have spent a long time trying to be heard, understood, or validated. For someone who has lived in constant emotional tension, silence can feel unnatural at first, almost like surrender. But it is not giving up, it is reclaiming yourself. When you stop explaining, defending, or justifying who you are, something profound happens. You are no longer participating in a cycle designed to drain you. Narcissistic dynamics thrive on reaction. Every explanation becomes an opening. Every defense becomes fuel. Silence shuts off the supply. It removes the stage, the audience, and the energy that keeps manipulation alive. This kind of silence is not passive or fearful. It is deliberate. It comes from self-awareness, not avoidance. You reach a moment where you realize that no amount of clarity will satisfy someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. So instead of repeating yourself louder or softer, you choose stillness. And in that stillness, your power returns. Silence also marks a shift in self-respect. You stop arguing for your worth and start honoring it. You recognize that your truth does not require approval to be real. By not engaging, you protect your emotional space. You choose peace over performance. That choice alone begins to heal parts of you that were worn down by constant emotional labor. What makes silence so powerful is that it communicates confidence without confrontation. It says, I know who I am without needing to say anything at all. And for someone who is used to controlling narratives and emotions, that quiet certainty is deeply unsettling. Silence becomes a boundary, a line that cannot be crossed because there is nothing left to grab onto. In the end, silence is not the absence of strength, it is strength refined. It is wisdom learned through pain and clarity earned through self-respect. And once you've discovered the power of silence, something else begins to rise within you, something even stronger. You start to trust yourself more than you trust the need to be approved. That's the second shift, and it changes everything. For a long time, your voice may have been shaped by reactions. You spoke to be accepted. You adjusted to be liked. You questioned yourself every time someone doubted you. But silence creates space, and in that space, you begin to hear something you may have ignored for years, your own intuition. That quiet inner knowing that says, this doesn't feel right, or you deserve better than this. Self-trust is born when you stop asking others to confirm your reality. You no longer look outward for permission to feel what you feel or to stand where you stand. You realize that the version of you who survived confusion, emotional manipulation, and self-doubt has already proven its strength. And once you see that, approval loses its grip on you. This is where the dynamic truly shifts. A narcissist thrives when you question yourself. When you seek reassurance, they become the authority. But when you trust your own judgment, their influence fades. You no longer need them to define what's true, fair, or real. You carry that authority within yourself now. Choosing self-trust doesn't mean you stop listening to others. It means you stop abandoning yourself. It means that when something feels wrong, you don't talk yourself out of it just to keep the peace. You don't betray your values to be accepted. You choose alignment over applause. And this choice is quiet, but it's revolutionary. Because when you trust yourself, your silence is no longer empty. It's anchored. You are no longer quiet because you are unsure. You are quiet because you are certain. And certainty, rooted in self-trust, is something no manipulative dynamic can survive. And as that certainty settles in, something else begins to happen, almost without effort. You start to detach. Not in a way that hardens you, not in a way that makes you cold, but in a way that finally clears your vision. Emotional detachment is not the absence of feeling, it is the presence of clarity. Before, your emotions were constantly pulled outward. Every reaction, every mood, every word from them had the power to tilt your inner world. But when you trust yourself, you no longer hand over the steering wheel of your emotional life. You feel deeply, yet you are no longer ruled by what someone else wants you to feel. This is where many people misunderstand detachment. They think it means indifference, when in truth it means discernment. You still care, but you no longer cling. You observe instead of absorbing. You respond instead of reacting. You allow emotions to pass through you without letting them define your worth or your decisions. In narcissistic dynamics, emotional entanglement is the hook. The highs, the lows, the unpredictability. These keep you invested, always hoping for clarity, validation, or closure. Detachment cuts that cord. You stop trying to fix, rescue, or explain. You accept what is rather than exhausting yourself fighting what will not change. And this acceptance is not defeat. It is maturity. It's the moment you realize that your peace matters more than proving a point. You don't need to win every conversation to win your life back. You don't need emotional fireworks to feel alive. With detachment, your silence deepens. It's no longer just strength or self-trust, it's stability. You remain grounded even when provoked. Calm becomes your default. And that calm sends a clear message. You are no longer emotionally available for manipulation. You are present, aware, and free. And that changes the entire dynamic without you saying a single word. And it's right there, in that calm, grounded place, that the shift in power becomes unmistakable. Not because you demanded it, not because you announced, but because the balance quietly changed the moment you stopped being emotionally accessible to chaos. Power in these dynamics was never about who spoke louder or argued better. It was about who reacted. For a long time, your reactions kept the wheel turning. Every explanation, every emotional response, every attempt to fix things kept you locked into a system where control lived outside of you. But when detachment settles in, the wheel stops spinning. You begin to notice it in subtle ways. The things that once provoked you no longer land the same. The comments that once hooked you now fall flat. You don't feel the urge to rush in, correct the story, or defend your character. And in that pause, power shifts because the game requires participation and you are no longer playing. This is deeply unsettling for someone who depends on emotional leverage. They sense the change before they can name it. The usual tactics don't work. The buttons they once pressed don't light up anymore. And while they may push harder at first, you remain steady. Not defiant, not reactive, just steady. That steadiness is what changes everything. You stop being predictable. You stop being controlled by fear, guilt, or the need to be understood. Instead, you move with intention. You choose when to engage and when to step back. You decide what deserves your energy. And here's the quiet truth. Power returns to the person who no longer needs to dominate the moment. You don't need to prove strength when you're rooted in it. Your calm presence becomes the new authority in the room. Without confrontation, without explanation, you reclaim control, not over them, but over yourself. And that is the only kind of power that lasts. And once that control returns to you, something very natural begins to form: boundaries. Not the kind built from anger or ultimatums, but the kind that rise from self-respect. Boundaries stop being weapons and become statements of truth, quiet, firm, and non-negotiable. Before, boundaries may have felt impossible. Every attempt to set one was met with guilt, resistance, or emotional punishment. So you learn to soften them, explain them, or abandon them altogether. But now, grounded in your own power, you no longer need permission to protect your peace. You don't over-explain where you stand. You don't argue your limits. You simply honor them. This is where calm becomes unmistakably strong. A healthy boundary doesn't need drama to be effective. It's enforced through consistency, not confrontation. You say no without apology. You step back without guilt. You leave conversations that cross lines without announcing your exit. And in doing so, you teach others how to treat you, not through words, but through action. For a narcissist, this is deeply destabilizing. They are used to pushing until you break, negotiating until you bend. But boundaries rooted in self-respect do not bend. They don't escalate, and they don't chase understanding. They remain steady even when challenged, especially when challenged. And here's what's most powerful. Boundaries are not about controlling someone else's behavior. They are about deciding what you will no longer tolerate. That shift changes everything. You stop waiting for them to change, and you start changing your access to them. This is where peace becomes practical. Your life begins to feel lighter. less reactive, less draining. You are no longer bracing for emotional impact. You are choosing where your energy goes. And with every boundary you uphold, you reinforce a message, not just to them, but to yourself, that your well being matters. Calm, clear, unapologetic self respect becomes the foundation of everything that follows. And as those boundaries hold, something surprising reveals itself. You begin to realize that this was never about winning. It was never about proving who was right or finally being seen as enough. What you were really searching for was healing. And that realization shifts your focus in a way no argument ever could. For a long time, victory may have felt like getting an apology, an admission, or a moment of accountability. You imagined that if they finally understood the damage they caused, you could move on. But healing doesn't wait for recognition. It doesn't depend on someone else's awareness. It begins the moment you stop tying your peace to their behavior. Choosing healing over winning is a quiet, radical act. It means releasing the need to be right in order to be whole. It means accepting that closure doesn't always come from conversations. It often comes from clarity. You grieve what you hoped for, what could have been, and you allow yourself to move forward without dragging the past behind you. This is where real strength shows up. You turn your energy inward. You invest in rebuilding trust with yourself. You notice the patterns you ignored, the red flags you rationalized, not with shame, but with compassion. Healing isn't about blaming yourself. It's about understanding yourself. For someone rooted in narcissistic control, this is the ultimate loss, not because you walked away angry, but because you walked away whole. There is nothing to fight against when you're no longer fighting for validation. There is nothing to manipulate and your sense of worth no longer depends on their response. And in this space, something beautiful happens. You begin to feel lighter, more present, more alive. The need to prove fades, replaced by a desire to grow. Healing becomes the victory, not loud, not dramatic, but lasting. And once you choose healing, the past loses its grip and the future finally opens. And as healing takes root, awareness sharpens. Not the kind that makes you bitter or hypervigilant, but the kind that feels like waking up after a long night. You start to see patterns instead of isolated moments. You recognize behaviors for what they are, without needing to label or justify them. And once that awareness settles in, something irreversible happens. You can't unsee it. Before, confusion kept you trapped. You questioned your memory, your reactions, your instincts. You replayed conversations, searching for clarity that never came. But healing clears the fog. You begin to understand that manipulation thrives in uncertainty, and awareness dissolves it. What once felt personal now feels predictable. This awareness doesn't come with rage, it comes with recognition. You notice the cycles, the emotional hooks, the subtle shifts in tone designed to provoke or control, and because you see them, they lose their power. You no longer internalize behavior that was never about you. You observe it, name it internally, and choose not to engage. This is where freedom expands. Awareness gives you choice. You know when to step back, when to disengage, when silence is the answer. You stop walking into emotional traps because you recognize the setup. Not because you're afraid, but because you're informed. For someone who relies on distortion and confusion, this is deeply threatening. Their influence depended on your doubt. Your clarity dismantles that without confrontation. There's no need to call it out or expose it. Seeing it is enough. Responding differently is enough. And here's the quiet strength of it all. Awareness doesn't harden your heart. It protects it. You remain empathetic without being exploitable. You stay open without being naive. You've learned the difference between understanding someone and allowing them access to you. Once awareness breaks manipulation, you move differently through the world, with steadiness, with intention, and most importantly, with your eyes wide open, never again mistaking confusion for connection. And with your eyes open, you begin to understand something profound. You no longer need to confront what you clearly see. Awareness has already done the work. This is where confidence takes on a new form. One that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't demand attention, and doesn't seek to dominate the room. It simply stands. Before, confrontation may have felt necessary. You believed that if you just said the right thing strongly enough, the truth would finally land. But now you know better. Truth doesn't need force when it's grounded in certainty. And confide, NCE rooted in awareness, doesn't need to argue. This is the power of confidence without confrontation. You stop correcting narratives that were never meant to be fair. You stop defending your character to people who benefit from doubting it. Not because you're afraid of conflict, but because you no longer mistake conflict for resolution. Your presence changes. You listen more, you speak less, and when you do speak, your words are measured, intentional, and final. There's no emotional charge behind them, no need to convince. That calm confidence sends a message more clearly than any confrontation ever could. You are not available for games. For someone who thrives on emotional escalation, this is deeply disarming. They expect resistance, emotion, intensity. What they receive instead is composure. And composure cannot be controlled. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be baited. You begin to choose peace, not as an escape, but as a position. You walk away from conversations that drain you. You remain grounded when others seek reaction. And in doing so, you reclaim your time, your energy, and your dignity. This is where strength becomes quiet but undeniable. You don't need to announce your boundaries or explain your choices. Your consistency speaks. Your calm speaks. And without raising your voice, without proving a thing, you make it clear that you have moved beyond the need to fight. Peace has become louder than any argument ever was, and when peace becomes your position, your L, Ifa itself begins to speak. You no longer need explanations, statements, or justifications. The way you move through the world becomes the message. This is where everything changes, not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. Before, you may have wanted to be seen choosing differently. You may have wanted them to notice your growth, your strength, your healing. But now that need dissolves. You are too busy living in alignment to perform transformation for anyone. Your joy is quieter, deeper. Your confidence is embodied, not announced. Your life starts to reflect the boundaries you set and the peace you chose. You invest your energy where it's reciprocated. You build relationships that feel safe instead of confusing. You wake up with less tension in your body, fewer mental arguments, more presence in the moment, and without saying a word, you demonstrate what it looks like to choose self-respect. This is what unsettles a narcissistic dynamic more than confrontation ever could. Not seeing you struggle, not seeing you chase, not seeing you explain, but seeing you thrive without needing them to validate it. Your happiness no longer revolves around their reactions. Your success no longer requires their acknowledgement. And here's the quiet truth. When your life becomes the message, it cannot be argued with. There is nothing to twist, nothing to provoke, nothing to pull apart. It simply exists. Peaceful, grounded, real. You stop trying to prove that you were hurt. You stop trying to prove that you mattered. Because your life already reflects that you chose yourself. And that choice shows up in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you rest. You become living proof that healing is possible. Not as a statement, but as a presence. And that presence speaks louder than any explanation ever could. And when your life speaks for you, the final truth settles in: freedom. Not the kind that comes from escape or distance alone, but the kind that lives inside you. Freedom from the need to react. Freedom from the need to explain. Freedom from carrying emotional weight that was never yours to hold. This is the moment you realize you are no longer defined by what you endured. The past no longer pulls at you for attention. The patterns that once felt inescapable no longer have a grip on your nervous system. You can walk into familiar spaces without shrinking, without bracing, without preparing for impact. You are no longer surviving, you are choosing. Freedom shows up in subtle ways, in how easily you breathe, in how quickly you recover when something feels off, in how you trust yourself to walk away without guilt, without second guessing. You don't need closure from someone who couldn't give clarity. You created your own by stepping forward. And this is the ultimate shift. You are no longer responding to the narcissist at all. They are no longer the reference point. Your decisions are guided by alignment, not avoidance. By values, not fear. You are living from intention, not reaction. This is when they truly know they've lost access, not because you blocked them, but because you moved beyond them. There is no power left to reclaim, no game left to play. You are no longer part of the equation. And the most powerful part? You didn't become smaller to survive. You became whole to live. Freedom didn't come from defeating anyone. It came from returning to yourself, calm, clear, unshakable. This is what it looks like when you outsmart the dynamic, not by force, but by choosing peace, awareness, and self-respect. This is not an ending. This is your beginning. And once freedom settles into your life, you realize something extraordinary. You no longer have to play their game at all. This is the final, most profound shift. The moment you fully step into yourself, unapologetically and without hesitation. You are no longer available for manipulation, no longer tethered to someone else's need for control, and no longer defined by the chaos they once created. Your life is now your own, and that autonomy is the ultimate victory. Before, you may have measured yourself by their reactions. You may have felt the need to prove your worth, to justify your feelings, to explain your choices. But now you understand that your value is inherent, independent of anyone else's approval. You are not here to serve someone else's narrative. You are here to live your truth, to honor your boundaries, and to thrive in alignment with who you truly are. This is where real freedom crystallizes. It's not about revenge or proving a point or even making them see the error of their ways. It's about living so fully, so authentically, that their influence becomes irrelevant. The games they played, the emotional hooks, the manipulations, they no longer find purchase because you have chosen yourself instead. And the beauty of this is subtle, yet unstoppable. Your actions, your calm, your joy, your unwavering sense of self, all of it communicates more powerfully than any argument ever could. There is no chaos to fuel, no control to surrender. You simply exist in your truth, fully present, fully free. By the time you reach this place, you have outsmarted the narcissist not by fighting them, not by exposing them, but by stepping entirely out of the arena they depend on. Your life, your peace, your choices, they are the ultimate proof. You have reclaimed your power, and nothing can take it from you. You have finally chosen yourself, and that is unshakable, undeniable, and eternal. So here's the truth I want you to carry with you long after this moment. Outsmarting a narcissist is never about anger, confrontation, or proving that you were right. It's about reclaiming what was always yours, your peace, your clarity, your self-respect, and ultimately your freedom. Every step we talked about, the silence, the self-trust, the detachment, the boundaries, the healing, the awareness, the calm confidence, the life that speaks, and the freedom, it all leads to one thing: a life lived on your terms without being tethered to someone else's manipulation. Imagine the weight you've carried lifting, not because someone else acknowledged it, but because you stopped giving it away. Imagine feeling light, grounded, and completely in control of your choices for the first time in years. Imagine living in a world where your reactions are yours alone, where your joy isn't borrowed or conditional, and where your boundaries are honored without argument. That is not a dream. That is what happens when you step out of their game and step fully into yourself. And here's the most powerful part: nay doesn't just change your relationship with a narcissist. It changes your relationship with yourself. You begin to see your value clearly. You begin to trust your instincts without hesitation. You begin to experience life without the constant drain of doubt, fear, and emotional manipulation. You realize that the real victory was never theirs to deny. It was inside you all along. So I want you to hold this: the moment you stop reacting, the moment you honor yourself fully, the moment you live in alignment with your truth, you have already won. Your life becomes the message. Your peace becomes unshakable. And nothing, absolutely nothing, can take that away from you. This is your freedom. This is your power. And this is the life you were always meant to live. You are done playing their game. You are done being anyone but yourself. And that, my friend, is unstoppable.